I'm Lana Johnson. As you can see, I am not Pastor Wade. Pastor Wade is with a group right now in Beaumont, Texas, working on disaster relief. He took a group down there on Thursday, and as you could see from the pictures, they are hard at work helping a woman, what they call mucking out her house, who has been completely flooded, start that cleanup process so that she can begin to rebuild. And that trip was made through your generosity, and so I thank you for that. I am Lana Johnson. I am the Director of Spiritual Formation here, and I'm so thankful you're here. I'm so thankful, and I thank you if you're joining us online and couldn't get out in the weather today. Thank you for being here with us as well. I'd like to start today with a little meditation. So if you will, close your eyes and just listen to what the Word of God has to say to us today. This is a great day just to sit back and listen from Psalm 4. Answer me when I call, O God, of my right. You give me room when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. The Lord knows those that he has set apart, the faithful. The Lord hears when I call to him. Offer your right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, oh, that we might see some good. Let the light of your face shine on us, O Lord. You have put gladness in my heart, more than when there was grain and wine abounding. I will both lie down and sleep in peace. For you alone, O Lord, make me lie down in safety. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You alone, O Lord, make me lie down in safety. I sleep in peace. That's a wonderful word for today. I was invited a while back to come and share my story today with all of you, and I've never done that before. I've been here for 10 years, never had the chance for you to get to know a little bit more about me. So I'm all excited about it. And the one thing I want you to know about my story is that I hearken back to something that St. Augustine said many hundreds of years ago. He said, if you love somebody, why wouldn't you share the way that you found a God? If you truly love somebody, wouldn't you tell them how to find the way to God? And so I love you. And I want you to have what I have in this life, something that I found. And so that's my story. We're going to get started. I grew up in a very hard circumstance, very difficult. I grew up in a family that had emotional instability, relational instability, and financial instability. The reason I talk about how I grew up is because as I've reflected back on my life, the one thing that I know is that the beliefs that I began my adulthood with were formed in my childhood. Our childhood is a very formative time, and as I begin to look back, I think, where did I learn that? Well, I learned it from being a child. Three very, very deep, concrete beliefs were held in my heart as an early adult. The first, money brings peace. Money brings peace. And if you've ever been a small child and mom and dad are arguing and fighting and you're hiding in the closet because you're afraid of what's about to happen, because see, my parents didn't fight like June and Ward Cleaver. You know, oh dear, I disagree with what you just said. My parents fought and ripped the phone off the wall to find somebody to hit with it. I grew up with a very deep, profound level of violence in my home. And so as a child, I was scared. But you know what? I knew what they were fighting over. They fought over money. They fought over the stress and the frustration over not having enough money. And I kept thinking, as a small child, I was thinking, you know, if we just had enough money, Mom and Dad wouldn't fight so much, and it would be peaceful in my home. So money brings peace. And then there's security. Money brings security. And whether you're a child or whether you're an adult, if you've ever had your home foreclosed on, if you've ever seen your parents' car repossessed, or if you've ever had the lights turned off, you understand the fear inside a child's heart when those things happen and they can't control anything, but their security, their home is being ripped out from underneath them. And oh, if we only had the money, the power wouldn't have been cut off, or we would be able to sleep in our own rooms tonight, you know? The third thing was that money brings happiness. Money brings happiness. I'm about to date myself, so don't laugh. Because when you grow up that way, not only are you involved in that environment, but you're also involved in a school environment. And you got friends, and you look around and you see the things that friends have, and you think, boy, I know my parents can't afford that, but if I could just have that Cabbage Patch doll, I would be so happy. Or as a teenager, man, if I could just have those Gloria Vanderbilt jeans, my life would be great. So at a very young age, I learned 3 things, and they were truth. Money brings peace, money brings security, and money brings happiness. And I learned one more too. I'm going to share it with you. Stay away from church, because those people are hypocrites, and they will do nothing but hurt you, and they will do nothing but judge you, and you don't need that in your life. Now, I found that to be true on my own pretty early in life, and so I had no problem with sticking to that one. And so I went off to college with this idea in my head of I wanted peace, I wanted security, I wanted happiness, and how was I going to get it? I was going to study hard, and I was going to work hard, and I was going to get a job and make as much money as I could, and I would be able to have those things. And that's exactly what I did. I went off to school, and I had a full scholarship, you know, and I'm working hard. I'm taking a full ride at school. I worked 2 jobs. I worked a full-time job and a part-time job, and I went to school, and I worked really hard for those years. And before you know it, I graduated. I graduated first in my class. And I had a job offer waiting for me in the middle of the worst recession we had seen in 50 years. But I had a job offer from a wonderful company, and I went to work. And I was used to working all the time. That's what I did. So I went in there and I started working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And life was good because you know what? I was in commissioned sales. That is a great job for a lone wolf, because I had already learned in life you can't trust anybody to give you anything, and nobody's going to take care of you. And in sales, the harder you work, the more money you make, and it doesn't depend on anybody but yourself. And I'm good with that. So I worked and I worked and I worked. And then that wonderful company that had hired me, they said, you know, we're gonna pay for you to go back to school. So before you know it, I worked, I got my MBA, and life is good. And I'm looking up in my 20s, and I have 2 degrees behind me. And I have a 6-figure income. And I can go anywhere I want, and I can buy anything I want, and I can do what I want, and I got money in the bank, and life was great. And I had this adrenaline. If you didn't notice, I am an adrenaline junkie. It's good for salespeople because every time you make a sale, it's like a drug. Oh, life was good. But you know what? I realized in my late 20s, coming into my early 30s, I was like, I don't have peace. I don't have security. Another thing about sales is if you don't work really hard every day and create something, there is no paycheck. So there's never any real security there. It's what can I do next? It's not about what you've done. It's what am I going to do today to keep that paycheck rolling in? I would lay awake at night and I would worry. I would worry about what was going to become of me. And I never could turn it off. And I certainly didn't have any happiness. I'll just tell you that. I liked my job, but I didn't have any happiness. And so I began to question those beliefs that I had, that I'd had all my life. I began to say, maybe those aren't true. But if they're not true, then what brings those things? Long story short, I figured I would try church. Now, I tried everything else in this world that's supposed to make you happy. I'll just be honest, and none of it had worked. So I went to church, and I didn't know any different. I didn't know the difference between a Methodist or a Baptist or a Catholic. I didn't know where to go. But I had opened a small business on the side in town, you see, next to the big business I was running because I didn't have enough to do. And this pastor came over to my grand opening, and he said, "Hi, I'm the pastor, and I'd like to pray for you." And even though I'm not a believer, I am a good Southern girl, and I got wonderful manners. And when the preacher walks in, even if you don't believe what he's saying, you say, "Absolutely, come in and pray for me, and thank you very much." And so I did that. And a little while later, I thought, well, I'll try church. And so where else would I go? I went to the only church I knew where I knew somebody, and I walked into that church, happened to be a United Methodist church. And he recognized me, and it was a big church. And he recognized me. It was amazing. I walked through the door, he remembered me, and he welcomed me in, and man, that was awesome. I sat down, and I realized that he wasn't the lead pastor. There was this large, imposing man with a booming voice. He was the lead pastor, and he got up in the pulpit, and he started preaching, and he started talking about things I had never heard of. He started talking about this Jesus that loved me. He started talking about this word grace. Believe me, the way I grew up, it was really hard, and grace was not a part of that concept. I didn't know what that meant. My parents, this is no lie, they taught me the golden rule. I was absolutely taught as a child, the golden rule is do unto others before they get a chance to do unto you. Before they get a chance to do unto you. Take their knees out from under them. And so this man was talking about grace and forgiveness and a softer side of life that I'd never experienced. And I liked that. That appealed to me. And so I just kept going back. Every Sunday I would go back. And before you know it, I was in a small group, because that's what you do in church. And they put me in this group with people, and they were lovely people. And they were kind to each other. And you could tell they really loved each other. And then they loved me. And it didn't matter. They didn't ask me where I was from. They didn't ask me what I could do for them. They loved me just for me. And that was the first time in my life anybody had ever done that. It was the first time in my life I ever felt like somebody loved me. Not because of who I was or what I could give them, but because it was just me. And I had found community, and I had found a family. I watched what this church did in missions, and they pulled me alongside them, and I went out and I got to feed homeless people, and I got to go out and work with mothers who had been in battered shelters, and I got to see all the good things they were doing in life, and they were just givers, and that was awesome. And I got to listen to that preacher with that booming voice every Sunday, and he taught me to pray, and he taught me to talk to God, this God that I could trust, and he taught me that I was loved through these words that I quickly learned were truth. Not what I had believed all my life. Those were lies. But this was truth. And so what did I do? Well, when those offering plates started coming around, I'm digging in my purse every Sunday. What do I have in there? I might have a 20 or whatever I've got, and I'm putting it in there. Of course I did. I loved it. This was my family. This was my place. And whatever I've got, I'm going to put it in there. And then before you knew it, I was thinking about what I was going to give the church. And I was writing checks. And the day before, I would write my check, and I would put it in the offering plate. And it got $50, $100. Boy, it was good stuff. And I was so happy to give it. So happy because I was there. And then one day, like all good things, it came crashing down around me. Because I walked into church. I sat down, and I'm open, and the preacher's up there, and he's talking, and he started talking about this concept of tithing, and I didn't know what that meant. So I listened for the first 3 minutes. And then when I figured out what he was talking about, I didn't want to hear it anymore. Here's the deal. This church had 3 budgets. 3. The first budget, the general budget, that's what runs the church. The second budget was the missions budget. That's the money people gave to go into all those wonderful outreach programs. And then the third budget was the building fund, and that's what they used to keep the building up and to maybe think about building another building down the road. So 3 budgets, and he explained to me what tithing was, and I'd never heard it, and I didn't know it, but I know it now. He said, tithing is the first 10% of your income, and it goes into the general budget. First 10%, general budget, that's where it goes. And then after that, if you want to give a gift to God, you can move into those other 2 budgets if you want. Do you know what 10% is? It is appalling. It is appalling. I was an investments person. Let me tell you something. I can do math in my head. And as I sat out there and I started thinking that, I was like, well, if I make $5,000 a month, that's $500 a month you want from me. And if I make $10,000 a month, that's $1,000 a month you want from me every month. And I got angry, and my stomach started to tighten up because I thought, okay, bait and switch. Bait and switch, my friends. They draw me in here. They start telling me about this Jesus. They start telling me I'm loved. They start telling me I'm important. And all they wanted was my money. My parents were right. I wanted to get up and leave because I got really angry, but that good, well-mannered Southern girl would not let me leave in the middle of a sermon, much like all of you. Nobody has gotten up and left yet. So I sat there, but I was not going to listen, so I tuned him out. I can sit like this for 45 solid minutes. You never know the difference. Nothing. So I went home angry because these people wanted my money, that money I'd worked so hard for. That money that nobody gave me, that money was for me. I had worked for it. I had to take care of myself because I was alone. And they wanted that. I could not deny, though, the last year of my life. I could not deny that these people had loved me. I could not deny that I had been sleeping better because I was more peaceful. I could not deny that when I started to pick up this book and I started praying that I felt the presence of God. And so I started thinking about it, and I thought, maybe I misunderstood. After all, I did tune him out after 3 minutes, and he had 30 more minutes going that day. So maybe I missed something really important. I thought maybe he was just talking to the wealthy people, says Miss Six Figures. Maybe he was talking to the people that had more money than they knew what to do with. That had to be it. Or maybe he's talking to the old people because they don't have anything to spend money on now, right? They're not going anywhere or having any fun. They don't have any trips to take. So maybe he's talking to the elderly. So I thought, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and I'm going to give this pastor the right, that chance just to make things right with me again. So I made an appointment with that pastor, and let me tell you something. He was an intimidating man because he seemed to know God, but I am an intimidating woman. Many of you can attest to that. And so I put on my best deal face, and I walked in, and I looked at him, and I said, Pastor, I think I've misunderstood what you preached on last week. I need you to clarify that for me. He said, sure, sit down. Tell me about it. I said, I think that I heard you say that you want me to give you 10% of my income every month. And he just started to laugh, and he laughed, and he said, no, you got it all wrong. And I said, well, thank goodness. I said, because you know what? That's the equivalent of my house payment, and you're not getting it. And he said, no. He said, no. He said, let's start over. He said, tithing, he said, that first 10% of what you're making and what you're bringing in every month, he said, that already belongs to God. You're not giving him anything. He said, if you want to talk about giving to God, he said, let's start with that 10% and let's start working our way up to 12, 14, 15, and then you can talk to me about giving God something. Well, I was not happy about that. But I do want to share something with you about that day, that wonderful, beautiful man. He shared a secret with me because he loved me enough to share that secret with me, and it has changed my life. And I do not say that lightly, my friends. It has changed my trajectory. It has changed the way I deal with the world. It has changed the way I deal with my God. And I'm going to share it with you. And I want you, don't be ignorant like me. Don't tune me out. Take it for what it is, and maybe it'll bless you. And it's the idea of covenantal living. Covenantal living. And here's the way it works. See, God is creator of the universe. God loves you. God created you. He created everything around here. And Pastor Rudy was right. Everything here belongs to God. And it does not matter what you think you worked for. It does not matter what you think you've accomplished, because you wouldn't have had those opportunities if he hadn't opened those doors for you. So it all belongs to him anyway, friends. And he made you, and according to Ephesians 2:10, you are his masterpiece. You are his beloved child. In you dwells the image of God. And he looks at you and he says, oh, there's my baby right there. I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of her. We were given above everybody else the ability to reason. We were given the ability to think. We were given free will, because God didn't want little robots running around earth. He wanted a relationship with his children, and you can't have a relationship unless it's free. And he said, here's the deal. He said, I'm going to be your God. I'm your father. I'm your maker. I'm going to wrap my arms around you. I'm going to hold you tight. I'm going to take care of you. He said, and your side of the covenant is just love me back. Love me back. Give me your heart above everything else, and you'll have mine. And live your life according to that covenant. I am yours and you are mine, and I've got you through the storms. That's the covenant. So if that's a covenant, why does he need my money? I don't understand. What's God going to do with my money? I learned as part of the covenant that it's not about money. It's never been about money, and it never will be. And as long as you make it about money, you are diminishing the covenant with God. The covenant is about our hearts. The covenant is about, have I given my heart up to God in worship? Is he the first in my heart? Do I worship him as a child? And the tithe signifies two things about our hearts. One, when I bring that 10% into this storehouse, that says, God, I put you first. I put you before student loans. I put you before a car payment. I put you before this house that I want. I put you before everything else. Does that sound a little bit familiar? I was not a Bible person back then, so I had to look all this up. Did you know that's the first commandment? The very first commandment says, we know the Big Ten that says, I will have no other gods before you. The most tangible way to show him that there's nothing else in front of him is that I give him the first 10%. That's how he knows my heart. The second thing that it tells my God about my heart is that I trust him. That was the sticker for me. I was a pretty generous person, I liked giving to people in need and stuff, so it wasn't that I was, I liked what money could give me and all, but I wouldn't have called myself greedy. But that trust in God, when I give him that 10% back, I say, okay, Lord, you've got it, and I'm left with 90, and I'm going to trust that you're going to give me everything I need. I'm going to put my life right here, Lord. And no matter what comes, I trust that you're going to take care of me. That was the hardest thing for me in the covenant process. I'm going to trust you, Lord. I want you to look at Malachi real quick with me. Malachi, it's the last book of the Old Testament. I want you to hear this. It's important. Malachi 3:8. Will anyone rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how are we robbing you? In your tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation of you. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse so that there may be food in my house. And thus put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts, and see if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you an overflowing blessing. This is formational in my spiritual journey. And the first thing I will mention to you is he says, bring the full tithe. Bring the full tithe. Folks, the full tithe is 10% of your income. Do you know how that hurt my heart to know that when I'd been putting those 20s in the plate, that wasn't what he expected? $20 is not a tithe, it's a tip. It's a tip. It's something you put in the plate. This is what I got for me. This is something I put in the plate to tell the pastor that he had given me a sermon that I liked and made me feel good. That's what $20 is. Unless I'm living off $200 a week. Now, if I'm living off $200 a week, and I put my 20 in there, that is an act of worship, and that is beautiful. My God is not legalistic. He's like, you know what? I see what's in your heart. I know what you've got. I know what you're given. And he says, I know what you think of me. Let's talk about those blessings for a minute. He said, I'll open up the windows of heaven. If you come into covenant with me, the windows will open. They will rain down blessing. I am anti-prosperity gospel. I am not ever going to promise you that God's going to give you more money for being a tither. That's not how it works. The word for blessing in the Old Testament, I had to look this up. The word in the Old Testament for blessing is barake, and it means peace. And in some context, it means his presence. Peace and his presence. And when we roll over and we see Jesus talking about that blessing in the New Testament, we see the word makarios, which means happy. Friends, I had spent my whole adult life looking for peace, for security, and for happy in money, and it was all right here. And the reason I didn't know it is because I did not read Hebrew and Greek. I did not know what those words meant. I didn't know what blessing meant. But I do now, and I've lived it. And I want to tell you something about God's opening the windows of heaven. My children are on a different trajectory than where I was. My children do not go to sleep in fear because they're worried. My children understand that there is peace to be had in the presence of God, and that mom and daddy don't fight over money because we know God's going to take care of what we need. He will not always give us what we want. Many, many things I want that I cannot afford, but he takes care of what I need. And I am thankful for that. I am so thankful for that. Friends, you have free will. Friends, you have a choice to make, and it's just between you and God. You're going to walk into that covenant. Walk in and say, God, I'm in it with you. You're going to get that 10%, and I'm going to trust in you that you're going to bring me everything this world cannot give me. That is truth. The night I walked in to see that pastor, he gave me some scriptures that he wanted me to just go through in my mind. He said, read them, pray about them, see what God says to you in this circumstance. He never pressured me to be a tither, and I would never pressure you. But I do challenge you to pick up those sheets out there in the chairs. I do challenge you, pick them up, take them home, talk to your spouse, read them, pray over them, and see where God takes you. It is down the path of blessedness. Guaranteed. And I love you, and I want that for you. I want that for you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.